This Restorative Justice Life is a production of Amplify RJ. Follow us on all social media platforms at Amplify RJ, sign up for our email list, and check out our website at amplifyrj.com to stay up to date on everything we have going on. Make sure you're subscribed to this feed on whatever platform you're listening on right now so you don't miss an episode. And finally, we'd love it if you left us a rating and review. It really helps us literally amplify this work. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to This Restorative Justice Life, the podcast that explores how the philosophy, practices, and values of restorative justice apply to our everyday lives. I'm your host, David Ryan Barcega Castro Harris, all 5 names for the ancestors, and I'm the founder of Amplify RJ. On this podcast, I talk with RJ practitioners, circle keepers, and others doing this work about how this way of being has impacted their lives.
Hey folks, I'm Elise, your producer, and today we are welcoming Tomay Douglass as our guest today. Tomay is a social worker, substance abuse counselor, and a restorative justice trainer and facilitator with Restorative Justice Education. Tomay integrates her mediation, mindfulness, and trauma training into her work where she provides conflict coaching, family conferencing, anti-racism work, racial healing circles, and healing circles for persons who experienced trauma. You will hear about how to get started with restorative justice work, how to navigate relationships in school, and so much more. But before we get into this episode, Amplify RJ is so excited to share some new projects with you today. As the weather is heating up, so are our workshops. You can now sign up for the Restorative Justice Summer Intensive for educators. Also, if you are at the beginning of your restorative journey, we are also having intro-level workshops. All the information you need can be found down below in the show notes. And if you want some cool new clothing to match the warm weather, please check out our Amplify Restorative Justice gear, which can be found in the show notes as well as our Future Ancestor Collective and our podcast clips, which are now being posted on our YouTube channel. Without further ado, let's get into this episode.
Welcome to me. Who are you?
I am a melanin miracle.
Who are you?
I am the descendant of indigenous peoples, African people, and Irish immigrants.
Who are you?
I'm a walking contradiction.
Who are you?
I'm the pain, the power, and the hope of my ancestors.
Who are you?
A mother, a daughter, a student, a Black woman, a misunderstood person.
Who are you?
I'm a reflection of you.
And finally, who are you?
Someone that is still growing, learning, loving, and seeking to do better.
Thank you. There's some really good answers in there, especially the first one. I love that, melanated miracle. For those of the people who aren't watching, and I don't think this is going to be a video clip, can you tell us what your shirt says? Because that just made my day.
Says 100% melanin chocolate.
But CHOCO-LIT. Choco
Yes.
lit. It would made
Yes.
my day. And this is a day that needed some brightness for me. How are you, to the fullest extent that you want to answer the question?
I'm relieved. Because of where I am, geographically in Virginia and why I'm here. So, and it was because of an emergency with my daughter. So I'm relieved because I'm the only family that she has, and I'm 4 hours away. Not that she has, but 4 hours away as a mama, that can cause a lot of anxiety, So the fact that I'm here and taking care of her, I'm good.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you were able to, one, be there for her, but also make the time to share with us your story about this restorative justice life. I know you've been doing the work longer than you knew the words. How did you get started?
Okay, so from my point of view, I got started because I Googled it initially. I'm just going to be 100% with that. I Googled it because I wanted a different way of being with students.
Hmm.
I was working in a middle school and I was working in a high school, but when I was in the middle school, I saw students being arrested,
Hmm.
and that bothered me. And what I did was I Googled and I found out, and I was like, okay, this is how they do circle. So I didn't get formal training, right?
Hmm.
It was something I did, and something that even my children actually, came home one day like, so can we do that with us? Friday nights, have a family meeting, and we sat in a circle
Hmm.
and took turns speaking. And finally, something happened um, that was really personal in my life, and it brought up a lot of memories from my past, and I was triggered. So I started researching, like, okay, who's doing something around healing, for people who experience child sexual abuse. So I found an organization, and I went through the process for myself.
Hmm.
So some people, I think they go to a training and they learn it and love it. But for me, because I experienced it in the power of a healing circle
Hmm.
and what it did for me, I was sold, you know,
And you're talking about hidden water, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, can you, we've had Mia Hunt, who I don't remember what episode that was. One of our early episodes, we had Mia Hunt, someone who was a circle keeper with Hidden Waters, share. But for people who might not have listened to that episode, can you share what Hidden Water NYC is?
So it's a restorative organization that focuses on families impacted by child sexual abuse. And they use 5 different circle models.
Mm-hmm.
So they use like an orange circle for parents of children who've been harmed. They use the purple circle for those who cause harm. They use a blue circle for the loved ones. So it's 4 circles. And I'll tell you why I said 5 in a minute. And the fourth one is the green circle, and that's for the persons who actually experience child sexual abuse. Now, I said 5 because we did a family system circle. So that's basically when the family members, if there's a person like who caused harm to another family member, everyone does a circle for the first for 12 months, and then they come together as a family
Mm-hmm.
to do a circle, and that was pretty powerful too.
Yeah, no, and that's like quite a drastic introduction into this work, right? Even though you had Googled it, right, earlier, having that experience for yourself is really something that I imagine um, set you on this path where, like, yeah, I'm about this life, you know? I'm curious, like, going back to when you were teaching, you said you were doing you were upset by your students being arrested, or students in the school being arrested. Um, that's been happening for years and years and years. What was it about that moment in time that sparked you to search for something different?
Well, I was interning at the time as a social worker,
Mm-hmm.
and that what sparked it for me was my engagement, unfortunately, at the time with the teachers didn't necessarily see anything wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
What they saw was there's a threat, now it's removed, and now I'm safe. That was the process from the adult's perspective. However, I'm sitting in the seat of that could have been my child, or that's me actually, from my earlier years,
Yeah.
except I just didn't have the police called on me.
Yeah, as someone who grew up in school, as a as a young black woman, right? We often pigeonhole people into these roles, right? Were there any experiences that stood out to you as like, this is unfair, this is unjust, and like you saw replicated with the students that you were working with as a social worker?
So you want me to reflect back on myself, my life?
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay, sure. Definitely. Well, it's interesting because when I was in high school, I got into a fight,
Hmm.
right? And what happened was after the fight, I was suspended. I was brought into an office, and my parent was called, and I was suspended. And no one talked to me. No one said, how are you doing? What's going on? And that was something that always stayed with me. So even when I came to this restorative justice life, it was so important for me to make sure that I would advocate for those and be a voice for those and help them to understand, children, youth, that they have, a voice and they have power. Because no one, if someone had have asked, what's going on? Why are you engaging in this behavior?
Hmm.
Then they would have known that I was being abused, right?
Hmm.
They would have known that what was happening in the lunchroom was me trying to make sure I ate. So when I got home, I wasn't exposed to more abuse, because I had to go in the kitchen and cook or something like that. So for me, I always, as I went to school and went to graduate school and things like that, it always stayed with me that we need to ask questions. We need to just begin with, how's your day? So when I did start as an intern and I ended up working as a program director of an after school program, and even in the after school program, I would have kids sent down to my office. The teacher is kicking them out of the class. And as soon as they get in my office, they're thinking they're in trouble. And I'm like, how are you doing? And that kind of like caught these kids off guard because they were expecting more punishment
Yeah.
and to be judged.
Right. And it's not just about asking the question, right? It's about meaning it and actually caring.
Right. So it's not being performative,
Right. Like,
right?
sometimes we talk about restorative justice as, you're asking a different set of questions instead of like, what rule was broken, who did it, how can we punish them? We were asking, what happened, who's impacted and how can we make things as right as possible? But it's not just enough to ask those questions, right? I think that's
Exactly.
positive. Uh, but if you're not coming from the perspective of this is another human worthy of my love, respect, and care, instead of like a problem child who just needs to be taken care of so I can do like the rest of my job delivering this learning to other people, you're going to get very different results.
Exactly. And that was the difference. I remember a student I can reflect on, and he came in and he was like, I don't want to talk. So I said, okay, have a seat. He said, I don't care. I don't want to talk. And I said, I'm okay with that. And then I told him, I said, so what I'm going to do while you're not talking is finish my work and have some water. Would you like some water? No, fine. And he saw that I really actually started working back on my computer and attending to my work. And then he just burst out. They never asked who did such and such. And he just started telling me everything that happened. And even after he finished speaking, I still went back to, and that's what I love about you when I listened to your podcast with not only who are you, but how are you? You know what I mean? And asking, like, because how did that impact you? How did that make you feel as a person to have someone, to have an adult standing over you, yelling at you, telling you you're always a troublemaker and sending you out? How did that feel? Because I have a problem with adults wanting our young people to be like us. They expect young people to think on our level,
Mm-hmm.
process information on our level, see things from our perspective, but they're not us. They're not even at that cognitive level yet. Their prefrontal cortex isn't even developed fully yet. But yet we hold all this baggage that we place on their shoulders and burden them with being like us.
Yeah. It's not just adults to students, right? I think what we're talking about is like people especially in the context of school, like people conforming to like a white supremacist norm of a white supremacist norm of the one right way to be, right? And if you don't learn this specific way, like that's wrong. If you don't perform you know, the learning or the participation in class a certain way, that's wrong. You're bad, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with expecting quote unquote professionalism and attention, right? But we have to be able to accept people where they are and how they're coming in and be responsive to that, not just saying, well, it's cool that's the way that you are at home, but here you have to be this way.
Right. And that's something that I hear too a lot with young people. I'm not your mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's back to what you just said. You know, you can be that way at home, you know, so but when we think about this punitive mindset, that's an outgrowth of white supremacy. It's an outgrowth of whiteness and white ideologies, you know, because and what people need to understand is, you know, when the punitive systems were created, it was because it was after the emancipation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, the slaves are free, but now we still have labor. We still need work to be done. So then they created these laws, you know, in a way, if you walk on the same side of a track with a white man as a black man, you go to prison. If you spit in front of a white man and you're black, you get arrested. So it's this punitive mindset is rooted in white supremacy. So when we think about it, and like you said, it's not just from student to teacher or teacher to student. It's just sometimes it's rooted in us as a people. We often go to the punitive side, not recognizing that that's an outgrowth of racism. It's an outgrowth of white supremacy, and it's something that needs to be uprooted.
Yeah. So like you were experiencing this, and like how did you even know to Google the term restorative justice?
Oh, I was actually Googling justice. Because you know, so and that's been like my path, justice. And restorative justice came up, and it took me to IIRP,
Mm-hmm.
and then some things about Howard Zare,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then what I loved is when I got to Hidden Water, I was initially trained by Kay Pranis.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, well, so what? You were trained by Kay Pranis, you know, oh, she's a white woman. Well, she's a white woman who was trained by First Nations people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we forget to say that piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that part. You know, it's not someone who said, I'm just going to take this and co-opt it, like it's been and it's continuously happening, you know, but it was something that justice. And of course, it's also rooted in the fact that I lived a life where I wasn't receiving justice when I was younger.
Yeah.
And even as I just grew up.
Yeah. And so like you have your social work career, right? You were learning more about restorative justice as you were going through these processes at Hidden Water NYC. Where did the restorative justice journey take you from there?
Oh, it took me, well, it took me to starting my own nonprofit, and it actually went from that to me collaborating with other organizations like the Restorative Justice Education underneath Dr. Tom Cavanaugh. And eventually it led me to USD, so the interesting thing is I'm a PhD student for the Education for Social Justice program,
Mm-hmm.
but I was actually introduced to David Karp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because of the Center for Restorative Justice. And that was the determining factor for why I chose that school, because I was accepted into a PhD program for social work, criminal justice. But the deciding factor for me was the Center for Restorative Justice, because the other schools didn't have that there. And I really wanted to, about this restorative life, right? So that's where it took me. You know, and it's been a journey that I would say up until this point, I feel like it's just been like all butterflies and roses until I got into higher ed.
Mm.
And then it was like, oh, okay, it's something else.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. Yeah, it's engaging whiteness. It's engaging people that don't see themselves. And it's to a place where, I began saying that I don't expect, I have my white brothers and sisters, and I even have my soul sisters that we get together once a month, and they're white and we love each other. However, I do have the experience of, my other white brethren, they just don't see me, right? And it bothered me for a minute when I first, last semester, I would say. But then I had to come to this understanding they can't see me because they don't see themselves.
Mm.
And when I say, and I was speaking to someone and I said, you don't see you. And the you I'm talking about is the you in history, the you and your forefathers, the you and your ancestors that committed the atrocities, against First Nations people, and the first harm, right? And the second harm with African Americans, Africans, into slavery, so I just had to really reconcile, or until we reckon, right? Like Daniel Serret says, for me, I had to reckon with this reality that sometimes white people are so deeply embedded and entrenched in their whiteness that they can't come out of it, to see it. Everything around them is right. So I do what I do because it's right. I'll take your process and I'll flip it up and turn it around because that's the way I think it should be, instead of honoring like the indigenous roots of restorative justice, and the circle practice. So it's been frustrating. And normally when I encounter certain spaces where I know there are a lot of, white people, my white brothers and sisters, I put my guards up. I prepare myself and I protect my energy. And I have to say that as I entered into a restorative space, I didn't think I needed to do that because it's a restorative, I didn't think I needed to do that. And that was a mistake, and I was exposed, to the microaggressions, to the dehumanizing, condescending comments, and it really impacted me. And I'm a person who I like to, protect my energy, but my body was like, oh, this is impacting you, because my face actually broke out. I had a physical reaction, and so I had to really step back and say, okay, open your eyes some more. Just because it's labeled, restorative justice, or people are saying they're restorative justice practitioners, it doesn't mean that they see from the same framework that I do.
Yeah. So we asked this question at different parts of the podcast. What does restorative justice mean to you?
Restorative justice, what it means to me is restoring one's dignity, right? Restoring everything that's intrinsic, everything that's inherent, all the things that we were born with, right? So it's restoring love. And that's why I love Fania Davis when she talks about justice, and she reminds us of what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, and about justice is anything that is, responding to anything that counters love, right? That comes against love, that stands against love. And so for me, restoring justice is doing that, because we're in a world that's filled with hate. We're in a world where people take pride in their hate, in who they are. And so for restorative justice, it's this coming together. It's a return to who we truly are at the core. And at the core, I want to believe that all people are good, powerful, and wise, like the 7 core assumptions. I want to have that assumption. I know it doesn't appear like that all the time, but for me, that's what it is. It's a return to who we are at the core, that good part of us.
Yeah. I'm curious, for me, there are lots of definitions of restorative justice that I use, but like that return to wholeness, right, to that good, wise, powerful self is important. What are some ways that you've seen like a limited definition of restorative justice in action?
Well, when it's used for, so I'm going to go back to the school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because one of the things that I do, I train teachers, and I see that it's often used as, oh, great, we have a tool now to manage our classroom.
Mm.
We have a tool now to help the Black and brown kids. So while it's good that we want to use it so we can lower suspension rates, there's more to it than addressing a punitive action or thinking of it as an alternative. So that's where it's limited to me, where it's only focused on this one way of being. Earlier when I was talking to a group of young girls and I gave them 3 examples of a circle, and I shared a video that showed how the circle can be used for addressing conflict between students that were once friends and whatever. And then I showed them an interview that I did with Kirsten Cole from WPIX News in New York around, my process of going through a healing circle. And then I modeled with them a community building circle. But that's it. Like, everything has to come together as one. And the main ingredient to me that's missing a lot is that community, that relationship, making meaningful connections and letting us be humanized by the human experience so we can find out what we have in common as opposed to what makes us so different.
Yeah, and when things are just about behavior management, right? That's not humanizing. That's like another way of control, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's one of the things. And again, that's an outgrowth. So I was talking to someone who's in a very high position and they're white and they were like, I don't see structural racism. And
that's when I walk away from the conversation.
right. Like, and so for me, I would like to see white educators. And I'm going to say white educators because they make up 80% of our population that are teaching our diverse children, right? And I would like to see white educators actually use the process for themselves. I would like to
What do
see
you mean
them
by that?
use it, to connect to themselves first. And to connect with others when they get in those spaces, and then to heal themselves, heal their mindsets. They can't, I'll say we, right? Because I can still have some stuff inside of me as well. They can't decolonize their mindset, if their mindset is focused on the other. And that's what I keep saying. Let me learn this as a tool for my toolkit to help the other. Help yourself, because that's part of the problem. You haven't had to do any work. Everything was just handed. You inherited this white privilege, and I often say that, whether white people say they don't feel privileged or not, they carry white privilege like an American Express card. They don't leave home without it. It benefits them everywhere they go, for real. That's what it is. And so it's like, it's time for you to do the work. And it's not easy work, but it's necessary work.
Right. Instead of this being this tool for the toolkit for school discipline, right? It is internal work. Someone, I'll shout out Denmark, who has been doing work with us in our workshops, was talking about how, restorative justice, it can be a lens, right? But it's also a mirror for you to look at yourself, right? And yeah, you talked about that earlier, like, you are a reflection of me, but like, how are you looking at yourself and your practice? And, if this is all about relationships and humanizing yourself, the first relationship you have is the relationship with yourself, right? And so like, how are you doing I think like the way that we frame our training with Amplify RJ, the things that we go more in depth with are like, how does this work for the relationship with yourself and then with others? How does learning how to hold space for your own emotions, and that's something that I struggle with too, right? Like as a cis man growing up in this world, like I was taught to, shove emotions down, just get the work done. It's not important for you to deal with that. What's important is your productivity, right? But how can I hold emotions for other people if I can't hold my own emotions, right? Like and there's so many examples, not just with emotions, with trauma, with communication styles, with self-care, right? How can you create a community where people are taking care of themselves if you're not doing that, if you're not modeling that? There's so much work that people have to do for themselves before we even start thinking about bringing this to other people.
I agree. I agree 100% with everything you said. And there's this tension that I have with like this whole idea of, you know, we need to do these trainings, and some people are talking about like we have to have certifications, make a specialist. It's going to be degrees. Now it's graduate certificates, and then how it can also limit access to those who are already marginalized, right? And so there's this tension, but part of me, I feel like people should actually like experience the process before they get trained in the process. They should go through a process before, because to your point, a lot of time I come across people and they are doing good work in their communities, but then for some reason I'm always privy to like the back end of things, and I see the struggle. I see the struggle, and the struggle is good. But then there are some people that are just, I had a conversation with someone, unfortunately, who said to me, yeah, I know there's racism in my organization, and that's what it is. We'll deal with it as we go along. So are we going to do any healing circles, repair circles, any circles to address this? I don't want to, and that was disappointing for me. But to me, it's more like, well, have you done the work for yourself? Like that was the question that came up, and then it's also like a reflection for me, like what part of the work am I not doing? How can I dig deeper into something, where, because I always say that the space that I hold is not always the space that I choose.
Mm.
And that's because if I enter into a circle, I know that I'm entering into a space where things are going to be put in the circle that can come up, and it might be uncomfortable, but in that process, I get to sit with, well, why is that bothering me? Why do I feel annoyed by what that person just said? So instead of me worrying about how can I react to them, it's like, let me respond to what's coming up for me, and sit with that internally. And I think if we do that more, we can like really build the bandwidth, the internal bandwidth and capacity, so we can authentically do this work and not do it because, it's the thing to do.
Right. I think like, was this a school? I don't want you to like name names, but was this a school?
No, it was an organization.
So, okay. So if it's an organization, like, the organization has a stated goal of why they exist, right? That goal is not to be anti-racist and equitable and just. It's to produce a product, right, or provide a service for people. And as someone like who is a business owner, right, I'm sympathetic to that, right? Where like Amplify RJ does not exist to be this beacon of anti-racism, equity, and justice. We teach that. That is what we do. And like we still strive to be it's not even like trying to be an example. We still want to be that way, taking care of our people. Well, the limited people that we have, right? We're still very small. Taking care of our people in ways that make them feel seen, right, and cared for as humans. It's a lot easier to do when it's on a smaller scale. I was wondering if it was a school because, like, the schools most schools that exist, right, their goal is to pass students through to equip them to be productive members of capitalist society, right? And like the goal of education is not to care for, the whole person. And so when we're in these systems that aren't built to serve humans and like their needs, fully acknowledging like the entirety of who that person is and what they need and what they can bring, like it's a tough thing because like everybody still has to make their money, everybody has to get through their day. How have you seen people do this work well within organizations?
How have I seen people do this work well within organizations?
And I think like it's easier to think about like small organizations where it's 2 to 5 to 10 people, right? But like on a larger scale, what does that look like? Because and you didn't say this, one of the things that I think often is that restorative justice doesn't belong in schools institutionally because the institution wasn't built for that. It's incongruent, right? Around the time limitations, the policies around what instructional hours are and what content needs to be covered, and you only have this many contract hours and things need to be done in this exact way, in this exact time frame, and if this circle goes over time, like, well, you don't have to stay for that, right? Like, how have you seen this done well? I know there are lots of people who are attempting it, and like there are ways that things are successful, and things that like leave something to be desired. But how have you seen it done well in schools or other organizations?
Okay, so I can say I'll just speak to a smaller organization, Restorative Justice Education, that's founded by Dr. Tom Cavanaugh. And I'm one of the facilitators with this organization. And when we have our business meetings, they're done in circle. We have check-ins. We actually live out the process, right? We do the process. And even when I'm in, a situation where I feel like I need to talk to somebody, I can reach out to one of those team members, and not like it's a soapbox or anything like that, but I can reach out to them, and it's a real community that cares. Everything he does is the culture of care, and I can say that it's extended to, everyone on the team. So I see that it's done well. I can't say that there's any specific place that, for me, even to speak to, I'm a grad assistant at the Center for Restorative Justice at the University of San Diego. Mm-hmm. And I think what works well is, again, and there's a small team there, right, is those check-ins. When we come together and have those check-ins, I think that's a good thing. And those are also organizations that are ran by white people. And so I'm automatically going to have a different lens, when I'm looking at the way people run or do things. So for me, it's still like, well, let me see how it's done here. Let me see how they operate. But I can't really say that I'm still in the process. I'm still in the oven, right? Yeah. I'm still in the middle of this journey, where I can't really speak to something necessarily being done well to the extent you're asking. What I think is important is that people don't think that, that might be stepping on some toes. But for me, I'm uncomfortable listening to people say that they're an expert over something that didn't come from them. But for me, it's important that people are human enough to say, I don't have it all together, but I'm working towards this end goal. I'm working towards being better and doing better. Yeah. I really don't have a better answer for you for that, because I'm still in the process, but I know some things I've seen a teacher in a classroom do it well in his classroom, his music class. The way he engaged his students, and he did everything in a circle, and it was amazing. But other than that, I really, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and I think like it's easy to point to individual cases, right, and small communities, but you were a restorative justice coordinator at a high school for a little bit, and by the look on your face right now that people can't see, like the quote unquote implementation didn't go so well. Like what went well? What do you wish had gone better?
So, well, this
Without
is
naming
what
the
didn't.
school.
I won't, but this is what didn't go well. That it took me an entire semester to connect with the teachers, right? Or I say semester. So from September to it took me until December, right? Because they had these walls up, and they felt like, well, who is this contracted person coming in, trying to tell us how to do our job better? And I'm like, well, that's a misperception. I'm not here to tell you how to do something better. I'm here to support what you're already doing well. If we change the way we look at things, then what we look at changes. So let's reframe that. I'm not here to, say you're not doing something good. And so I feel like that time that it took me to connect, because one of the things, the principal said, well, I need you to be able to go into their classrooms and see what teachers are struggling, blah, 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 and all that stuff. And they weren't like inviting, and it took me to observe like what they were doing. And I had to centralize myself in a space where the students knew how to access me. But in working with the students, the one thing I knew was important was I needed to work with the teachers.
Right.
And everybody kept telling me, well, the teachers don't show up. You might get 3 teachers to show up if you try to call a circle. Okay. So what I did was, yeah, if I say what I did, they're going to know who they are. So I did a special circle just for them. 25 teachers showed up. 25 teachers showed up. Then after that, whenever they would see me in the morning, they were like, Tomay, come sit with us. Tomay, come in my classroom. They started inviting me in. And then they were coming to me like, can we have a circle for teachers who are caring for their loved ones who are sick? So it changed, it blossomed, so it was rocky. So I would like to see teachers, not look at restorative justice coordinators or practitioners as someone trying to tell them how to do their job better, but to actually help support what they're already doing well.
Yeah.
Because go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, there's something about the way that implementation processes often happen within the restorative justice world where you are bringing in an outsider, and that doesn't always feel good. I can imagine. I've been in that role, not necessarily a coordinator. It was called a coach, where I was at. And so much of what you have to do, right, is build the relationships first, right? Within the constructs of the contracts that I used to work under, like we would only be at a school for a semester, right? And like, what do you expect us to be able to do in a semester, right? Like, just be able to start building relationships and be like, here are the seeds. Good luck, you
Right.
know. This isn't this isn't a quick fix, right? As much as we're trying to help people, you know, improve what they're already doing well, there's also this piece where it's like there does need to be a shift, like internally, about like how you see your students, right? How you see each other, and I don't know that you can. I know that you can't make people do that. You can only provide the opportunities for them to engage, right? Inviting them into those processes.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen overnight. I'm thinking a lot about the way that I'm working with some schools right now and trying to work with some schools in the future. And like, really, like, what is, in a lot of ways, I don't care about the school, right? I don't. I care about the people there, right? I care about the the teachers who are, yes, teachers, but they're also siblings, they're also partners, they're also
That part.
mothers, they're also fathers, right? They're also friends of people, as well as colleagues and instructors, right? How are you navigating this life in good relationship with other people?
Mm-hmm.
If we're taught that, relationships aren't important, we're just trying to get these test scores, right? Or, move these students on. That's not where we're not going to get like the outcomes that you and I would be looking for. And I know that most people who are educators wouldn't say that, yeah, my goal in life is to like produce test scores, right? But we're put into a system that incentivizes that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Right. It's a colonial system that promotes that, and what you said is really important. And that's how I connected, right? Through building that relationship. And through food.
Talk about
So,
it. Talk about it.
it's something about, or having food present that brings people, like, that's something that's common, right? It reminds them of, if I'm having dinner at home, or when grandma used to cook these big meals, and all the siblings, as you pointed out, would come together. And unfortunately, that was the thing that got the teachers together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Food. That opened the door, and they began talking to me and talking to each other, and then after they would break bread, we would all break bread, then we would go sit in circle, and the good thing is I had time to do that with them, because it was like a PD, or, a professional development day. So I had more space and time to do that, and even I modeled that with the kids. I was able to, have pizza or whatever it was, so that students can get there. And it got to a point that they didn't care about the food anymore. What they cared about was connecting to one another. And I remember doing an activity with the teachers where they were just, all they had to do was like say something they appreciated about the person sitting to their right.
Mm-hmm.
As we went around. They didn't know each other. They really didn't know each other. So they were like doing superficial things. Like, I appreciate the way you have that top on. It was superficial at first. And then somebody finally said, well, I don't think I know you because you always, lock your door in your classroom. And it was so powerful, because when the talking piece came back to that person, they were able to say, it's because my mom had a terminal illness and I knew she was dying. And they called us in so the family can start. And so that was something that they just wanted to cry. They closed their door and they were crying. And once that was shared in the space, that shifted the atmosphere, where people started looking at each other different. Like, it's not about making sure, all of their AP exams are ready, so they can have these students take them. It was more about what they carry themselves into the space can spill over into the children. Because when I worked with the kids of this particular teacher, they were like, well, he doesn't help. He doesn't offer any additional help. I can't go ask him questions if I don't understand. He talks too fast during class. Because he was trying to manage his emotion. It goes back to what you said. If people don't know how to hold space for themselves, then they can't do it for others. So it's like, that's why I think it's important that we all do our own work. That we all do our own work. When I sat in circle this morning online, and somebody kept saying something about walking, and in my head, I hear, Allen Iverson saying, practice. You want to talk about practice, right? So I'm like, walking, like, she want to talk about walking. And then I had to check myself, right? And say, okay, you're having a reaction to her saying this. Why? And if I'm honest, and I was in that space this morning, because I need to walk. I need to take better care of my health. And I needed to be honest with myself, and I shared that out into the space. I didn't just process it and keep it to myself. You know, I wanted to normalize talking about things that can be difficult, when you sit in those spaces. And that's what I feel like, my one of my calling is to help people have difficult dialogues with ease, and destigmatize a lot of these conversations, because of the topic per se.
Right. And I think there's something about vulnerability, right? That doesn't happen overnight. It can, right? When you're forced into very tough situations, it can, right? But so often that trust and that ability to be vulnerable is built a lot more slowly, right? Maybe around food. Hospitality is super important, right? The way that you welcome people in. And I think, like, that might be, especially in COVID times, right? That's something that's been a challenge for so many people to create those opportunities to build relationships, right? It's not just about let's teach you this practice. It's let's teach you this toolkit, right? It's, you know, who are you? How are you? Um, this is who I am. This is who I am. This is how I am. Isn't it great that we're in community together?
Right. That's yeah, that's what it should be. And we can create those conditions, you know. It's interesting because, I again, going back to this morning when I was in that space, I was presenting, right? And I was facilitating, the circle. So I felt it was important for me to model what it looks like, and not model it because that's the thing to do,
Mhm.
but model it because I want to normalize this thing, right? Or I love your title again, this restorative justice life. I want to normalize that, where it's something that people are saying it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to sit with discomfort, you know, but instead of reacting, because that's the natural impulse to react, take a pause and reflect, not on the other, but reflect on yourself, and that's what I had to do so I can dig deep and say, okay. And when I shared it, it was the founder of the organization that was in the space that kept saying that. And she appreciated
Mhm.
that I raised that up, because I could have went into a space and, act like, I'm so happy with every area of my life. It's amazing. And I just want to show you some wonderful things about restorative justice.
Mhm.
And oh my goodness, no, no, I was not doing that. Like, and I think that that's what's missing too. Like, I feel like I want people, when I sit in a circle, I want them to show up as themselves. So I used to teach at Metropolitan College of New York in Lower Manhattan. And I remember, if a student would say something and it was like a song attached to it,
Mhm.
I would just burst out in song. I can be at the board writing something and they're like, Professor, I've been thinking. And I'm at the board, I've been thinking, and I go into a little whatever. And they just, it was something that they were like, she's really showing her authentic self. She's just being who she is. So I'm going to smile. And I tell people, I don't have a poker face. So if you see it show up on my face, then that's what it is. We can talk about it later, but I don't have time, to play games with other people, because for me, if I'm imparting something to someone, that's a huge responsibility, to teach. I often tell people the other meaning for the word converse is intercourse. So as we're engaging in conversation, you know, a person has the ability to deposit a seed, and in depositing that seed, it's either going to be something that's going to produce something fruitful and wonderful.
Mhm.
It's going to be something that, can negatively impact you. So
Yeah.
I think that's really something that's important. People don't, think about it like that sometimes, but I try to be very mindful. I don't know if I'm probably aging myself. I don't know if you ever saw this show. Okay, I'm aging myself. It's Ally McBeal.
I'm aware that that was a show. Yeah.
And so it's like she would just be sitting and they would show like the cartoon images of what she was thinking in her mind.
Hmm.
And I do that, right? And so sometimes people are like, "Oh, you're just so, you're so positive and you're so this." And I'm like, "You have no idea that while you were speaking, I was asking God to forgive me for the thoughts that came up in my head because of the things I wanted to say." Like that's how mindful I try to be,
Mm.
like check myself. So I'm not going to check you without checking me first. It doesn't make sense. And I know how it feels when people do that. I'm like, you got all of that going on and you checking me? No. So, and that's something that I share and I bring into the space, especially with youth. I told them I'm not the fan of clapback, but I am a fan of talk back. I will talk back and I encourage them to talk back. I encourage my white sisters when we get together because sometimes they're like, Tomay, I want to ask you something, but I'm not sure. And I'm like, well, then ask because I'd rather you ask me, so I can talk back to you before you go somewhere else and just, make something worse than what it needs to be.
For sure, for sure. Um, yeah. How do you want to continue to grow in this work, right? You're a doctoral student. You still have your own nonprofit. You're a part of, what's the group in New York?
Oh, Restorative Roots
The restore.
Collaborative. Yeah.
So you have like you're in a lot of different restorative spaces with USD as a grad student, with Restorative Justice Education, with the Restorative Roots Collaborative, and you know your own work. How do you want to continue to grow?
To just, really push the thinking on, what restorative justice is and really to be in spaces where I say the things that other people find hard to say, because I think for me, it's, you know, there's always a risk when I speak out that someone is going to say, "Oh, she's an angry black woman."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like at this point where that's a stereotype. So if that's where you're stuck in your growth, or your journey, then that's you. I'm not going to hold on to that, and I'm not going to let it limit me because it might be the person sitting behind you or the person sitting next to you that will capture what I'm saying, and they're like, okay, all right, I don't see her as an angry black woman. I finally see her, and I think that's what's important because I know in a lot of spaces I'm not seen. I have to see myself, and so I get to know people because, like I said, I am a reflection of you. It's Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I look at you, David, and I can see me and myself. So that's where I want to go. I just want to grow in that area in that way and produce some content that's really going to be profound, thought provoking, and life changing.
Yeah. You want to share what some of those things are? It's still in the works.
Yeah, it's still in the works. I can't speak too much to it because it's something that's really going to be for my dissertation work.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a few years before that, but I do have some amazing professors that are excited because they can see it already. Like, oh, this is going to definitely be something for that. I am currently working on an equity framework, and producing this initiative at the Center for Restorative Justice. And the framework is called Heal Humanity Now.
Mm-hmm.
And HEAL is an acronym. And so the H is for honoring the power of your voice. and it comes with some other things underneath it. I don't really have time to go into that. And the E is for equity focused practices. So we can just have that equity mindset as we do things, and how we show up with other places, other people. And the A is for anti-bias outcomes, right? So it's not enough to, and there's a quote, I can't quite think of it. It's not enough to say, I just want to give you love and light. It's not enough for that. I need your action. So that's what that A is for. And then the L is for leadership. How can we develop more leaders? Instead of looking at people as problems, to look at them as people who are presenting opportunities for growth.
I want to transition into the questions that we ask everyone, right? What is a place that you really wish people knew this work? Assuming that schools, families, and the criminal legal system are off the table, because that's what everybody says.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I want to see it in Congress. I want to see it in government. I want to see it in the White House. That's where I want to see it.
Yeah, how would that
That's
look? How would that show up?
It would show up that they would actually circle around a policy decision before they enact one, before they create a law, that they would actually have people at the table that will be most impacted by that law. And so for an example, when Alabama turned back some laws around abortion, that impacts women, right? But the lawmakers are men. The ones who really want to push this, they're not the ones who are being deeply impacted by what happens to their body. And I happen to believe that if we had restorative justice at that level, where we're including all stakeholders, to first build community, because I think there's such a hierarchy, and that's where it needs to be. Because, restorative justice to me is a power equalizer, and we don't have to, I feel like sometimes people almost fear Black bodies because of the harm that was done, and they think we're going to just take revenge, right? And really be like the Equalizer, the movie that Denzel Washington played in, right? Instead of understanding that we can use the power equalizer, and that's the power of the circle, to build community, to connect and hold difficult dialogues around these issues that need to come up. So while they're already sitting around a table, they can still sit at the table. Just do it in a process and in a way, and include the voices of those that are deeply impacted by the laws they create.
Yeah, it seems like a pipe dream.
Of course it is, but hey, I have to give myself hope for something. Like,
Absolutely.
What would it look like? I mean, but I honestly, even I would say another place I would want to see it would be like in the Me Too movement. I would want to see it there. I would want to see it in a space where Black women and white women can actually come together and be authentic, because while I really feel like when we come together over our pain. We join and unite over our pain, but there's still so many differences and divides between us, where white women still look down on Black women as the other. And so I would like to see it in those matriarchal movements.
Yeah. I think there's something about like restorative outcomes or accountability, right? Is harm acknowledged, right? And then behavior changed and like support given to like change that behavior. We're very good at like pointing out the harm. Those other two pieces, there's a lot of growth that we as a society have to do along that. And I understand where that comes from. I don't know if this is gonna air before I released this other podcast I did with the podcast, like, Let's Talk Bruh. Future David here. That collaboration is coming. Stay tuned. And Jeremy we were talking about, like, what does public accountability look like for, like, an R. Kelly, right? Like, that's not really an important question for me, right? Because that's happened. I want support and resources for the people who have been harmed, right? But who are the people in Robert's life, right? Who can give him that support, that challenge and connection, if we were going to call back to, like, that episode with Malika Muhammad about, making sure that, we want to support you as a person, and you can't keep doing the stuff that is causing harm. Like, what are the things that you need to do in order to change? Because, like, you are a part of our community. We love you, and you are hurting so many people. There's so much space, especially within, right, across all of society, but, like, especially within, like, gender-based violence, for sure.
Yeah, I thank you for even raising that up, because I often get pushback because I do work with those who cause harm,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's because of the studies that I've done. Like, for example, statistics tell us that children who are exposed to domestic violence are 74% more likely to grow up and commit a violent crime. And yet when they commit a violent crime, we're like, yeah, let's punish them and throw them in the
Mm-hmm.
jail system. But if we have the statistics, we have the knowledge, then what are we doing to actually interrupt that process? What are we doing, to create a better person and help them have the opportunity to be a better version of themselves so they don't continue the harm? Because, yeah, I can date James and then James does something to me and I'm like, well, I kick you out. Now he goes and dates Sally, but then he twists her arm. She kicks him out. But now he goes and he dates Jill, and Jill ends up in the hospital and he goes to jail for a little while, comes out, and now he dates Janet and he kills her. Like, why wait for it to get to that point?
Mm-hmm.
So if nobody wants to do that work, if they feel like it's a dirty work, I feel like anybody that has breath, they can be redeemed if they're willing to do the work. But if they're being demonized, nobody's going to say, hey, I'm a demon. This is my issue. Come help me. But if people know that there's someone who cares, even if it's connecting them to their community, right? Like you said, if Robert had people in his community that can support him, hold him accountable, and not say, you got the money, you can do whatever you want. You got the fame, you can do whatever you want, but say, nah, bruh, you off. That's wrong, and then backtrack to, all right, now that we get you to want to heal from the harm you cause others, heal yourself, because that he has a story too. And so many other, I keep seeing the quote from, I forget his name, that says it's easier to raise strong children than it is to repair a broken man.
Mm.
And there may be truth to that. But if that's what we keep telling men, that they're broken and they can't be repaired, then why try?
Yeah. You get to sit in circle with 4 people, living or dead. Who are they? And what's the circle question you ask them?
Ooh, that's a good question. Living or dead, 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's a good question. I would sit in circle with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I would sit in circle with, you have me thinking. Yeah, I would want to sit with Jesus. I would want to sit with Apostle Paul. I would want to sit with Michelle Obama. And I would want to sit with, it's too many other women I would want to sit with. Oh, gosh. I know. I would want to sit with Angela Davis.
So Jesus, Paul, Michelle Obama, Angela Davis. What's the question that you ask that circle?
how can we realistically go high when we want to go low? So I'll flip her Michelle Obama's when they go low, we go high. Like that sounds good. It feels good.
Yeah.
But tell me how to do that. Because there's a lot of low blows that's coming at me and my people and other people in the community. So how do we go high? And what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes I turn it back on the interviewee, but I'm not going to do that right now. I will ask you, what is one mantra, affirmation, or something that you want everyone listening to this podcast to know?
Oh, a mantra. Goodness, I have a few of them that I want them to know. I'll just stay with honor the power of your voice.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that here with us today. That would have been a great thing to end on, but there's still two more questions. Who is one person I should have on this podcast? And you have to help me get them on.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, oh goodness. Oh, who is one person? Oh, I don't know. Have you met with Dr. Bankshead from RJoy already?
I have not, but I should reach out.
And there's Dr. Tom Cavanaugh
Yeah.
from Restorative Justice Education. I just know he's so busy, but he's definitely someone that because I work with him. It's interesting because I traveled to do work with him before, and we all stayed at the same hotel, and we would just meet after the training and go, have dinner together.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like he kept saying things that was like leaving such an imprint on my heart and touching my soul. I looked at him and I said, "You sure you're not mixed? You're starting to look black to me." That's what I said to him. He is just as white as he want to be, but the love that was exuding from him and the care that was exuding from him. Oh my gosh.
So
Ooh,
I'll be looking forward to that introductory email.
Okay, you got it.
Yeah. Last question. How and where can people support you and your work in the ways that you want to be supported?
Oh, well, for now, they can just, they can follow me on social media right now because I have like different things in the works. So I haven't actually put something out there to capture. So it would be at Tomay Douglass, across social media, or even they can support me at the center, USD Center for RJ. Yeah, those are the two places I would say right now.
And we'll have those linked in the show notes for people to connect. Thank you for honoring your voice. I'm going to bring it back to what you just shared. Thank you for honoring your voice by, sharing your wisdom, your stories, being vulnerable with me here today. I really appreciate it. Anything else that you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
No, just to keep listening in to Amplify RJ,
Hey,
and
like, rate, subscribe.
yeah.
Share all the things. Well, thank you so much, Tomay. It was really good to talk with you. Everybody else, take care, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you, Tomay. It's Elise here, and here are a couple things that I thought about from this episode today. I really appreciated that right off the bat, Tomay said that she learned about restorative justice by Googling it. I love this because I think that it's so important to remember that education can come from so many different places. Although seemingly such a small thing, it is important to remember that everyone starts somewhere, and you can start by just Googling things. How did you start on your restorative justice journey? I also enjoyed the analogy she used for white privilege by comparing it to an American Express card. I feel like it's kind of a fun way to actually see that it's something that you carry around and don't realize that it is something or an advantage given to you until you see that someone else doesn't have it. In what ways do you work to dismantle white privilege in your community? Thank you so much for listening today, and don't forget to check out our future Ancestors Collective and our YouTube clips on this podcast. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.
Like what you heard? Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast on whatever platform you're using right now. It really helps us further amplify this work. You can also support us by following us on our social platforms, signing up for our email list, rocking our new merch, joining our Patreon, or signing up for a workshop. So many options! Links to everything in the show notes and on our website, amplifyrj.com. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.